Hello, my name's Michael Keneally, and this video is from my Druid Forest School. So look at the website for the Druid Forest School. And I'm telling you in this video about the work you can do with the gods and goddesses of the ancient Irish. So I'm actually standing on the cairn of Knocknarea, and behind us is Ben Bulben Mountain, full of sacred earth energies from the quartz-rich rocks, and still inhabited by the presence of the gods and goddesses of the ancient Irish. And it was here on this ground that W.B. Yeats and Lady Gregory and others started the Celtic revival, because the gods and the goddesses of the ancient Irish, who retired to the Hollow Hills probably about 500 BC because they simply could not maintain their specialness and have to keep fighting loads of invaders one after the other. They retired to the Hollow Hills to wait until humanity was ready to hear their message again. And W.B. Yeats and Lady Gregory were doing vision work here on this actual landscape that you can see, opened the door to that. And now we take it even further with work on the sacred landscape and with visionary meetings with the gods and goddesses of the ancient Irish. And there's a course on many individual gods and goddesses on my Druid Forest School website. And also there'll be a programme in 2019 and subsequent years of visits to these beautiful sacred sites, and not just ordinary visits, but including visionary journeys to meet these gods and goddesses, and including the message, what is their state of consciousness, their identity, meaning for me. It's a work of self-transformation, of raising of consciousness to connect to faces of the divine. Because there was a divine intention to create the earth and to create Ireland. And, well, certainly the manuscripts say that earlier inhabitants here, you know, the dreadful Fomorians, sick, dark, piratical people, ruined the intention that goddess Danu had when she created this land as part of the great divine plan for the earth. And so the Tuatha De Danann returned here, having been driven out by the Fomorians, bringing with them their gods and goddesses. So this is like Homer's Iliad and the Ramayana of the Vedic peoples, a time when the gods walked the earth, when the distinction between human and divine was not the dualistic concept brought in by the Abrahamic religions, which of course devastated Ireland from 432 onwards, when St. Patrick brought the Catholic Church here, and all the damage that did. But now the door is opening once again to the power, beauty and might and majesty of the ancient gods. So briefly, who are they? Well, clearly Danu is the great mother goddess, and particularly goddess of the rivers, and indeed, like the ancient Irish people themselves, like the Tuatha De Danann, she came from the Eastern Mediterranean area. The people who settled here before the Tuatha De Danann actually came from southern Turkey, as proved by DNA and wheat analysis. And these peoples brought Danu here. Danu, the giver of fertility and right living and nurture and upwelling inspiration from her rivers. And then there's quite similar Bridget, who became, you know, quite multifaceted, a creative goddess of smith work, for example, as well. An ancient god is the Dagda. Now the Dagda had like his cauldron of rebirth. And, you know, warriors could be dipped in the cauldron of the Dagda after a day's battle and be reborn. You could go to the cauldron and find plenty. Okay, well, that's not just, words in a medieval manuscript written by an Irish monk who didn't understand what he was writing about for a noble patron who was paying the monastery, who did have an understanding probably. But it has such immense meaning for you if you yourself can stand before the Dagda, look into his cauldron and receive abundance. And are you open to it? He had other sacred weapons like a club that killed at one end and gave life with the other, like a harp that in divine order played to secure the turning of the seasons. The list is very long, and there's much to it, much more to it than the monks writing the manuscripts realised. And that's why people who simply try to reconstruct from manuscripts or the diggings of archaeologists put a wall around themselves because they can't contact the greatness that the Iron Age people, the Tuatha Dé Danann who came here, could perceive in their gods and goddesses, could connect to, could emulate, could become. So, for example, there's the myth, of near here, the battlefield of Moitura, where the rock energies are beyond belief, a gateway to Shis or hollow lands below the mountain of the battlefield of Moitura. And there, near there, at Heapstone Cairn, is situated a myth with far more depth than people realise about Dian Cecht, the healer god, and his children, and the differences in healing approaches that was clearly going on and being worked out at the time the Tuatha Dé Danann came here to these rocks in the beautiful mystical west of Ireland. Of course, there's the Morrigan. Now, the Morrigan is the war goddess of the ancient Irish, and again, she can be misunderstood so that people who have, really quite sort of nasty, aggressive identities simply wear her as a badge to justify that. But in fact, what does the myths reveal? She is a goddess of sovereignty. She mated with the Dagda astride the river Unshan the day before the battle of Moitura, and thus gave him victory and sovereignty. She demands ethics, and the mating allegedly took place astride the river Unshan just over there. A sacred land, a sacred myth, which monks could deride and ignorant people could scorn. But the truth available to you through that myth of the mating of the good god and the war goddess, the ethical sovereignty and the victory over darkness. We work with that sort of thing in each of my individual gods courses. Over there is the Atlantic Ocean, and of course the sea god is Manannan. And again, he is such a vast vibration, such a vast face of the divine, because he's an immensely powerful god, and yet he's a shapeshifter, sort of rather like Neptune or Poseidon, very similar. And of course they were the same Indo-European peoples, including the Vedic peoples. And so he can give us spiritual truths by looking through his mists, because things aren't necessarily what they seem. And so one of the gifts of Manannan is to see things through the mist for what they are, about who you are and your life. And he too has wonderful power animals, and he drives a chariot over the surface of the waves. He's god of the dead, and oh yes, he has a wonderful boat, and we can ask him indeed to make a journey of learning, perception and understanding in his boat. So I've just given a few examples, and what you need to do is look at the courses page on the Druid Forest School website, and that will give the gods and goddesses that I'm teaching at the moment. The list expands all the time, and I'm sorry that in the hurry of extempore speaking I'll have missed some. I mean, what's coming into my mind is Medea and Etain. They are the most wonderful gods and goddesses of the ancient Irish. Etain is, quite similar to a Hindu goddess in that she's like a vibration of pure goodness. And there's great truth and importance in the problems that the love between Medea and Etain encountered from Fuamnac, the vicious woman led by the evil druid Bressel, and how those forces of darkness pursued goodness and beauty through hundreds of years. Does that ring a bell in your life? Were some people so jealous of your God spark? Because each of us has a God spark that existed before the world was made. And we are simply faces of that, with lessons to learn for each lifetime. And W.B. Yeats, who actually lies buried beneath Ben Bulben Mountain at his own request, wrote a wonderful poem about before the world was made. What is our true face? Who is that? And again, people do wonderful work on that course. I haven't mentioned Ogma. Now, Ogma is, obviously the inventor of the Ogham, but also he's a warrior. So he's a warrior and a writer. Now, that has a lot of responsibility, because so many people with Geminian gifts sort of lash out the formula right in a journalistic quickness. But that's not what writing should be about. Writing should be about also the communication of divine perception and truth. And Ogma has his sword of justice. The list could go on and on and on. I mean, oh gosh, I've forgotten Lugh in this list. I am speaking completely extempore with no notes. But Lugh is the most wonderful, new energy that came into the Tuatha De Danann consciousness at the time of the Second Battle of Moytura. And he took over leadership of the gods, rather like a sort of Uranus lightning burst. And he spoke to each of the craft groups and warrior groups and spiritual groups in the Tuatha De Danann before the battle against the dark and twisted Fomorians, the battle of life. And he said, and what gift do you bring to the battle? What gift do you bring to the battle? So have a look at my Druid Forest School website and enroll on one of the courses. Thank you.